I find the tech team, if you've got a bunch of developers and you say, hey, do you want to build something or should we just go and buy it? Of course they're going to say build.
We now have a new live event, which is our Women Plus Tech Leaders event on the 5th of March.
Pales into significance, but it just got me thinking, like, what would we do if our internet was turned off?
Am I being unfairly not promoted in my business? Is there a reason that I'm not reaching leadership that doesn't feel justified?
You might even have been more technically able than the company who built the product you're going to buy.
It's nice to know whilst this podcast is friendly, the game is still ridiculously competitive.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our next episode, episode 6 of the London Tech Leaders podcast, the CTO Lens. We are delighted that you have joined us again this week. And David, I'm delighted that you're here too. How are you doing? How's your week been?
Yes, it's Blue Monday, I hear. So we've all got to be depressed and sad and generally hating ourselves. But I just can't bring myself to it. I am at a point where I am dieting. So today is the start of the mega diet. And quite frankly, I'm desperate to do it. I've got to that point. Most people are like, oh, I've got to go on a diet because I'm like, I've eaten too much. I've overindulged too much. I just am so ready to be a bit cleaner with my eating and do a bit more physical stuff and stuff. So actually, I'm quite like, I'm go Monday, not Blue Monday. I'm like, yeah, I'm up for it. I've already been out for a bit of a walk today. I might pop to the gym later on. I'm concentrating on my food. So yeah, I'm happy and perky. How about you, Sophie?
Amazing. Well, I can see you're happy perky with your yellow gilet, very, very kind of bright and sunny. And I'm wearing blue actually today, and I did not realize it was Blue Monday, but it makes sense now that you've mentioned it. Why today, when I was scrolling through BBC News, every other article was why January's so hard, what you can do to perk up your mood. And I was wondering what my phone knew about me that I did not myself yet know. No, I'm good. I've been doing some of the sort of healthy eating as well. I've been trying to do Veganuary, which is January, but you're vegan. And I've done it before. I think it's a great way to sort of eat consciously and healthily, but I keep forgetting and it's really bad. And I keep sort of sitting down and having a bit of cheese and going, oh God, I'm supposed to be doing Veganuary. And you tack on a bunch of days. So I think I'm into about the 7th of February that I'm now going beyond the end of January, but working on it. Yeah. But what's got me excited this week in particular is that we now have a new live event, which is our Women Plus Tech Leaders event that is now live. You can sign up to it. It's on the 5th of March, and it's all about using culture as a leadership tool. And so for anyone who hasn't been to a Women Plus Tech Leaders event previously, this is where we create a sort of, I don't really like the term safe space, but it's a space for women to kind of come, congregate, network, and hear from some really fantastic women. Every time we put these events on, I'm absolutely blown away, not only by the caliber and the titles of the women who generously join us on our sort of panels and give talks, but in particular the insights they share and how much our audience, how they really sort of resonate with them, and our audience seems to take away so much from it, not only hearing from these experts, but also, networking with other amazing tech leaders in the room. So I'm really, really excited that's out. And you can, if you take a look at the link in bio, you'll be able to sign up for that event on the 5th of March. And I'm sorry that we won't see you there this time, David. I know you said last time, maybe if you wear a dress, could you sneak in? I was about to say you should put on a sort of moustache to disguise yourself, but that probably isn't particularly helpful for a Women Plus Tech Leaders event.
Well, I don't know. We don't want to not include women who have facial hair. So, who
Very
knows?
good point.
Who knows?
Very
What I
good
do
point.
know is that there are good reports that come out of that event from everybody who attends. I think it's doubled every time you've run the event in terms of number of attendees. I've also seen the lineup, which looks spectacular. So I think it'll be a really, really good event. I know what you mean about safe space. It feels like the right thing to say, but it feels a little bit like, I think it's just a space where us men won't be blustering in our normal, slightly overconfident, if use is too noisy, too loud, in your face way, right? Not all men are like that. I may be talking about myself, but I think it's nice that you women can talk in an environment where you don't have to put up with any of that, and you can just focus on what it is that you want to talk about technology wise. So I think that's great.
Exactly. No, it's fantastic. So do join us if you haven't already signed up. So David, what have you seen today in the news that has caught your eye? Or sorry, what have you seen this week in the news that's caught your eye?
Yeah, so actually there was something here which I don't want to get into the politics of it. We don't really do that here, but there's been a lot going on globally, a little bit of unrest and around the world, and in particular, when I was looking at what was happening in Iran, one of the things that just piqued me from a technical news perspective was that their internet has been switched off. Right. And I know this seems like, when there's lots of protests going on, people are being killed, there's corruption, all that kind of stuff. It may seem like it pales into insignificance, but it just got me thinking, like, what would we do if our internet was turned off? How would that work if our internet was turned off? And if everybody just takes a moment and just thinks about the number of touch points they have with the internet over the course of the day, from, checking on your bank statement to seeing what's on your TV, to streaming something we have IoT devices these days in the home that rely on the internet, right? I'm not sure. There's a lamp in the corner of our bedroom, which I talk to. I'm not sure I'd know how to switch it off if the internet were down, So I know it sounds a bit jokey, and I don't want to make light of the situation going on, in unrest around the world, but it's a real kind of like, the internet has just woven itself so closely into every single moment of our lives. It must be really quite distressing, just from a basic communication point of view, right? Particularly when you're in a tough position and you don't necessarily know what's happening elsewhere in the world or with your family and friends and stuff like that. So yeah, I think the internet, this might be a statement of the office, but it has become one of the staple parts, one of the necessary. It's a bit like water and air to some people, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a
Yeah.
good thing, Sophie. I don't know if we should learn some lessons and think, how could we, I don't know, there's a lot of digital detox goes on these days, isn't there? I don't know whether that would be something that we should be a bit more resilient around.
It is really, really interesting. And I think you've made a good point that, this is not a politics or political podcast. And so, neither of us is suggesting that what's happening in Iran at the moment is a digital detox, but it does raise the question of how technology embeds itself in our lives and how we form habits around it. I mean, we're maybe slightly different ages, but I do remember sort of coming home and you have to wait for your mum to get off the phone so that you could go on the computer to chat, or having my first mobile phone that was internet enabled, but we hadn't paid for the internet bit. So you would sort of hit the button by accident and you're desperately trying to close it down. And it's so far from this, as you say, this internet in our pocket whenever we need it. You wouldn't think of, leaving home without your phone because you can't do anything and it's all internet connected. And I don't know, whenever I go to a hotel, we have a few Alexas around and you have this habit of going, Alexa, turn on bedroom. Well, there isn't an Alexa necessarily everywhere. So this kind of embedding, I think, is really, really interesting. And we see people who kind of go through these. I think often in my experience, they are phases where you get a dumb phone or you say, I'm going to set my phone into black and white. So I'm less kind of enticed to play with it and I want to break away from technology. But I do think we've got to a point, and I think Iran is really highlights this, where the world is so innovated with technology and with internet that it's really difficult to function when you're disconnected from it. Of course, there was a time before we had internet in both of our lifetimes to some extent. But now that it's everywhere, taking it away is such a challenge. And we don't know what the future is going to hold. There's certainly more climate crises happening and they're going to affect technology infrastructure. And maybe one day there will be a time when it's more common to say, yeah, well, we don't have electricity, we don't have internet. And as you say, kind of building up that muscle to be able to survive a little bit better without it, and not to suddenly go, well, I can't access my bank because all of the details are on my phone and my phone stopped working. I think is going to be something really important. And AI, of course, is a great example of this. I think we have, and particularly at London Tech Leaders events, often one of the hot topics is, are we going to all completely lose our brain capacity because AI does everything for us? And as a human race, we're going to become stupider and less capable. So, kind of really starting to think about where we intentionally want to delegate function to technology and where we want to keep our own skills, I think is going to be an important question.
And it's good to theorize about this, but have you had any practical examples? Have you been without internet for the day? I'll give you an example. I drove up to North Norfolk yesterday. We decided to go on a muddy walk in up near Holt on the North Norfolk coast. And as we sort of got, Norfolk's a big country, and we're right on the south end of the county. Sorry, big county, and we're right on the south end of the country. As we got further and further through it, particularly beyond Norwich, the internet signal started, the phone signal, not just the internet signal, but the phone signal started to go. And then it's basically almost nothing up there. And we had a whole conversation, for about 4 hours, no end of times. We'll just look it up, and I haven't got the internet. Sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't catastrophic, and it was of our own choosing rather than we'd been put in that situation. But yeah, just for a 4-hour period of time, we basically had no internet and missed it at least half a dozen times when we just naturally went to do something or look something. Even Google Maps, it's like stupidly.
Yeah.
I mean, I've lived in Norfolk certainly all of my adult life. I know how to get around Norfolk, but we rely so heavily on sat-nav and Google Maps in our car. Got in the car to come home and came to the first junction, and Google Maps hadn't connected to the internet yet because there was no internet around there. And I was like, well, do I go left or do I go right? And my wife was just, she was quite disparaging about it, actually. She was a bit like, come on, you've lived here all your life, just use your instinct sort of thing. And I'm like, I just rely on sat nav to do it for me sort of thing. So fortunately, I found my way home. But, so there are some fairly sort of simple things. And quite frankly, to your point about resilience, Sophie, it didn't impact my day, right? Because I thought about it for 3 seconds and went, well, I know it's left because Norwich is over there, so I'm just going to go left, right? And then I then didn't turn it on, and I got home all the way, which was like an hour and 10-minute journey, without once referring to my sat nav, and felt some strange sense of achievement. And it was a bit pathetic, but it was sort of also like, well, I just proved I can do it, sort of thing. So yeah, maybe we need to reprove that we can be a bit more resilient without the internet on a regular basis.
I think it's something nice to practice, particularly if you're taking a sort of weekend mini break and you're ambling around a city, and you can say, like, it doesn't matter if we get wrong. Well, let's work it out. As you know, I was in Mexico at the end of last year, and there were absolutely a few times where, both of us had forgotten to pull up the Google Maps before we left, and you're in absolutely the middle of nowhere, and you just go, well, I guess we'll keep driving. And we drove down a path, because we didn't have a map. We drove down a path that sort of started looking like a path that you could put a car on, and increasingly there was more grass, and there was a farmer with a couple of cows that were sort of pulling a rake or something, and he must have gone, what the hell are these people doing? Absolutely no idea where they are. So he sort of reversed all the way, and it's fun. It's an adventure. So yes. I'm not going to be too angry about that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
we should definitely. Now, talking about the internet, from not having it to maybe having too much of it, we've seen this week that an artist, can I call them an artist, called Sienna Rose has surfaced in the last couple of months. And Sienna Rose is a music artist who's been in the charts, released a lot of music, most of it on Spotify, and is starting to gain some traction and build a career for herself, themself, itself. You can see where I'm going here. It turns out Sienna Rose doesn't exist, and she is an AI invented avatar, and her music is all AI. I'm not sure they've animated her into a video avatar. I think it's just photographs, made up AI photographs, and her music. And apparently it's quite good and reasonably unique. So I don't think there's a copyright issue here. I don't think anybody's claiming that whoever has generated her is ripping off other artists, which is the usual sort of cry from AI generated music. Oh, they nicked all our copyright and stuff like that. So is this the way forward? Is this okay? People have liked it. Were people being tricked? I don't know that they were being tricked. It feels like maybe, but some people, including some significant big people, around the world, have been hooked into this and really, really like it. So what do you think about that?
I think it's tricky. I think I think it's interesting and it's tricky. What interests me is I had heard some of her music. I didn't realize she was AI. And I think actually, I was reading about this on BBC. I don't know if they've proven, no one's admitted that she's AI yet. Everything points in that direction, which for me is what makes it really interesting, because there are so many, my sister loves crocodiles. She sent me a video recently and said, this is a really funny video of a crocodile. You have to see it. And you look at it and you pick up the bits, the kind of, the frame rate isn't quite right or something, there's a splash of water that doesn't look like a splash of water would look. And you go, oh, I think it might be AI, but I'm not completely sure. And we do get fooled by this. And there are things that I've seen people respond to, not so much in the mainstream media, although, politically there's lots going on in the world right now. And someone puts up a video and it kind of goes viral on Twitter and you go, well, actually that's AI generated. And we keep getting fooled. And so for me, what does that mean when we talk about the arts and kind of, more cultural things like, painting? I'm doing my little air quotes there, and music and things like that. I personally don't like it. I think if AI can help us be more efficient, absolutely fantastic. But I think there's something incredibly special and human about the arts. And so, even if I hear a great song it feels a little bit soulless to me. So I don't really like that aspect of it, but I do find it interesting, this whole sort of dance, or it's a little bit of an arms race. AI keeps getting better and we keep getting tricked, and then we keep learning. It used to be if there's, fingers missing in the picture, then it's AI generated, but it's getting better than that. If the words are all squiggledy, it got better at that. So it's kind of this arms race of can we trust what we see anymore, or what we hear in this case? And ostensibly not.
I hear you. I'm thinking, so for those of you who've avidly followed my career, there was a brief moment where I was in music artist management about 15 years ago. And my brother and I did it. The reason that we did it is that I'm not musical at all. I mean, I can knock out angels in a pub karaoke bar on a Saturday night if pushed, but my brother is a songwriter, right? In fact, it runs in my family. My son's a musical director, etc., etc. So everybody but me is musical, pretty much. And my brother's really good songwriter, but he's very poppy, right? He writes sort of very, very pop songs, sort of thing. And he wrote for himself when he was young and his band, and they nearly made it, but didn't quite. And then he wrote for a teenage band who we were managing, and they sort of nearly made it, but they didn't quite. That's a standard thing in the music industry. But now he can still, he's still tuned in. He's got teenage children. He's still tuned into that sort of teenage pop thing. But, I mean, he's a lovely person, but you wouldn't want to see him, in a pop video or anything like that sort of thing. He's sort of middle-aged, slightly overweight, a little bit graying, beard, all that kind of stuff. Lovely bloke. Not your iconic pop kind of person that the kids are going to pay to see. Not anymore, anyway. And so maybe he's got an opportunity through some kind of AI avatar to continue to push out his music in that way. So it could provide opportunity. It doesn't just have to be seen as a negative thing, shall we say? But I think there's the big stars. Paul McCartney's quoted as talking about it and stuff like that. The big stars are like, no, it's going to ruin the soul of music. It's going to take away the creativity. I think that there's a bit of room for a bit of sort of interworking here and compromise, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. And now you've mentioned it, I wish, and this is, kind of 3 wishes from a genie. I wish the world was a world where actually your brother can do his music, and it doesn't matter if he's, not 14 years old and little girls are going to put posters of him on their wall. I love the example of Carole King, her famous album Tapestry. Famously, she couldn't find the right front person for it, and eventually said, well, I'm not a great singer. I'm not necessarily conventionally attractive, but I'll just sing it myself. And it's a fantastic album. And having that kind of that soul and that authenticity come through, I think is amazing. I will say, to your point, I do think there's a time and a place. I have a little bit of a side hobby in video production, and finding background music for videos, and then dealing when you sometimes have to deal with, the kind of the copyright and the licensing is just such a nightmare, and it takes such a long time, and you want to put that time and energy into the creative aspect of sort of video creation. So if I could just hop into an AI and say, here's my video, make something that's, a little bit lively, a little bit energetic, and it spits out 7 songs and each one is perfect, and I don't have to worry about copyright or anything like that, which I'm sure it definitely does exist already, and I just need to seek it out. That for me is a really good use case. Something else caught my eye, which was, and I can't remember whether it made it into the final cut last week, but it was all over the news last week that the Grok, the sort of Twitter AI, had been allowing people to create deep fake images, non-consensual images, mostly of women who started wearing normal clothes and ended up wearing not particularly nice clothes, and everyone was up in arms and saying this is terrible and we need to regulate the technology. And then I think X responded by saying, okay, we'll regulate it with a little asterisk, and you follow the asterisk and it says we'll regulate it so that only if you pay for X are you actually able to access it, and we're not going to do anything to stop this particular use case. And everyone was up in arms about that. But there is a new development, which is that the mother of one of Musk's 13 children, he's repopulating the earth, is suing them. And that's because a picture was created of her, and this is really tasteless actually. Someone dug up a picture of when she was 14 years old, again wearing clothes, and they put her in a bikini, and not only that, they put her in a swastika bikini, and she's Jewish. So this is some really, really tasteless stuff, and it really reinforces that, X can be a little bit of a digital cesspool. But obviously the big irony there is that she is the mother of one of Musk's children, and you sort of would hope that Musk would look at this and go, oh God, now I have been affected by the sort of negative externality of this technology. I empathize with why everyone was really upset. We're going to change it. But actually what they're doing is they're suing her back on a technicality. And that technicality is that she was suing them in New York, and the terms and conditions of X say that if you sue us, you have to do it in Texas, I think. So this is all, it's a little bit ridiculous, and obviously there's slightly less nuance than our topic on AI music. But it does start to paint a really clear picture of, the degrees of regulation that could exist when we come to AI. And it's not just a question of regulate yes or no, but more, what are the use cases that actually we just don't want them in general? But David, did you catch this? What do you think of this?
Yeah, there's quite a few things in here. So for a start, Ashley St. Clair, the mother of Elon Musk's 13th child, is caught in a custody battle for that child. So there's a little bit of preloaded guns going on here, right? There's a little bit I know the subject matter is easy to victimize, but actually, she's gunning for him, he's gunning for her. So it was already a kind of a fight, right? And this may just be one tool in that fight. Don't know. I'm not sure you can believe half of anything. It's just all good news. It's all just sounds great and sensationalist, right? Sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe she just sort of like run a million miles away from Mr. Musk. I think that's probably the best lesson that she can pass on to a lot of other women here. That getting involved with is probably not the best idea in the world. But at the same time, as you say, 14 years old, Jewish swastikas. I mean, who is letting that algorithm run wild, right? I mean, we all know from our computer background that there are rules you can put in place, right? There are all sorts of things. I tried something at Christmas. My brother, who has a big sort of grey beard, quite a big long beard. My younger brother, he had my two nieces sitting on his lap in a photo I took at Christmas time, right? And it was just a nice photo. They were sitting on his lap sort of thing. And as a joke, I thought I'd make him look like Joseph, as in Mary and Joseph, because it was Christmas time. So I asked AI to put the two little girls in some sort of shepherd's outfits and put him in some kind of shepherd. And it said, sorry, this is against our cultural policy. And I was like, oh, okay. And, maybe that shows that I was being culturally insensitive in thinking that would be a fun thing to do, right? But it felt pretty harmless to me. I wasn't intending to put it on the internet, just a family sort of fun thing. But, I was checked. So how is Grok not checked for a 14-year-old in a bikini with swastika, right? I mean, it's just like, who's making the rules up here, right? So I think there's some basics. I don't think this is about AI. I don't think this is about Elon Musk. I think this is about the world just being a little bit more sensible with what we're accepting, is right and wrong out there in the world, and people should grow up a bit. That's maybe oversimplistic, but
I do agree with you. And I mean, no kind of, no tool that decides what you can and can't do is going to be 100% correct. But you sort of, if you take the concept of a smoke alarm, do you want it to be too conservative and okay, it goes, but actually you've just burnt some toast? Or do you want it to be under conservative and your whole house burns down and nobody knows? I was not allowed on ChatGPT, I think a while ago, to make a picture of Shrek. My friend loves Shrek. I was making her a Shrek picture. It said you can't because he's a sort of copyrighted character. Right. I'm fine with that. Yeah. If that means that a woman doesn't have a picture of herself at 14 in a bikini that sort of is very offensive religiously,
give up
I'm
one for the other,
it.
right? Yeah, exactly.
I will sacrifice it. Yeah. Absolutely, every time.
And that's the excuse that's used. Oh no, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of creativity, freedom of this. And it's like, do you know what? If we're going to avoid that, we'll give up some of those. And I think that's the compromise that we as society have to decide, and tell these technology people, like, implement some societal rules that we're going to be okay with. Don't just let us go to the bleeding edge of all this stuff here.
Absolutely.
Oh, well,
absolutely.
There you go. Some interesting stuff in the news this week, Sophie. I'm sure we'll come back next week. I'm sure our conversation around some of these topics will spurn some other stuff happening, as it always seems to. So we'll see what happens there. But thanks for chatting through that.
So welcome back. We are so delighted to have a fantastic guest with us this week. Hema Purohit is many, many different things. So Hema, I'll introduce you very briefly, and then
Uh-huh.
I'd love for you to give us the sort of full introduction at your end. But you are an advisory board member of London Tech Leaders, so we're delighted to recently have you as part of the group. You're founder of Lotus Advisory and Consulting, where you work on sort of strategic advisory and consulting within, tech transformation, go to market, etc. I mean, you have so many absolutely incredible roles. You're a NED as well, I think, in the NHS, which is something that David is doing. So tell us a little bit about sort of you and what you're here to talk about with us.
I will. Thank you, Sophie. Lovely to meet you and David. And I think I'll start with the fact that this is quite an exciting role for me. So other than all of the other roles that are on the CV, I met London Tech Leaders last year. I think you and I met originally around March anyway, Sophie, right?
Yeah.
And I was really impressed with the group, the way the events were run. So yes, I'm very biased, but I'm very pleased as well, actually. I'm very excited to be on the board. So thank you for that. Um, Right, who am I? What do? I do a lot of things, as you said. I am a 30-year veteran, if you like, in technology. So I've been around in the industry for a very long time. I've been very, very privileged, and I've worked for some amazing companies: Microsoft, Google, Oracle, VMware, CSC. So I've done pretty much every role there is to do, from being a project and a program manager all the way through to being a regional sales lead and running sort of, P&Ls and quotas and creating new business units, which is always fun in a big tech company. In the last year, I decided to step away from corporate life. So what I'm doing is I've taken all the logos off, and I can now go and give people advice for free. So I don't have to worry about which company I work for, which logo I'm wearing, but all of that experience over 30 years of, global transformation programs, public sector, ministerial, stakeholder management, advising governments on strategies, etc. I mean, all of that stuff was there, but I was always limited in a corporate role as to who I could speak to and how I could help. And I think you probably know me well enough to know that I have this unrelenting desire to go and help everybody out there. So for me, it was a chance to sort of, become a little bit more free. So I've been doing advisory work, everything from helping companies who want to come into the UK, set up, healthcare businesses, leading teams on empowering them around sales enablement, doing some government and ministerial work, be it at BCS, I'm a NED, as David said. So there's a whole host of things in there. And I was very pleased, actually. So Luke sort of, contacted me and said, would you like to come in and speak about some of the leadership development stuff you've been working on over the last year? So last year, I developed basically something called a leadership essentials masterclass. And I did it in honor of International Women's Day, but it isn't just a women thing. It just happened to be, it was the right time to do something. And I had a group of 15 absolutely wonderful, really, 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 really nice women turn up, very different, some completely different roles. So some were CEOs of startups, some were in healthcare, some were managing children, childcare. So it was a whole mixed bag, and at different points in their career. But the one thing that brought them together was, we don't want another certificate. We don't want another stamp to be able to go and show people, but we actually want some real life lessons. How do you manage conflict? How do I understand what my brand is? How do I actually go and communicate confidently? And how do I know who I need to communicate with? And these are all things that you can't get in theory. You can get to a certain point, but I'm a huge believer that actually doing things in practice and actually having somebody with experience work. So I'm very lucky. I have a fabulous network of very talented people out there who are always happy to drop things from me. So we had 5 or 6 different guest speakers came in and had an absolutely fantastic day where we basically shared our experiences with this group of women. They shared back. We all learned something, and we made some really good friends. So um, version 2 of Leadership Essentials, which has been going for the last year, is actually taking some slightly controversial topics this time. So last year was all about, and I ran the session with that group, but also, I've run it with some corporates, and I also ran it individually. But then this year, there's a few things that sort of got me thinking, and I thought they're the safe subjects, brand visibility, what's a good leader. But the things that we don't talk about, especially as women in tech and women leaders, is why am I not getting that promotion? Why am I being overlooked? What do I need to do that's different? Why do I need to change my behaviors? How do I actually plan for my own career? So one of the modules that I've completely revamped is very much visibility versus volume. And that's exactly what this session is about today, where I think, we're going to explore a little bit around what are some of those pitfalls. Why do so many women get to a certain point and then just not really manage
Mm,
to get further than that? So,
yeah.
not quite a summary, sorry, but that gives you an idea, right, of what was going on.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. I mean, it's amazing to hear about your background, and it's amazing to hear how your passion for just really taking all of the incredible experience and expertise that you've accumulated from, as you say, some absolutely incredible brands, and being able to give that without needing to discriminate in terms of who you can give that to. So, I mean, it's really exciting, and certainly hearing about your sort of first version of the masterclass, it sounds like you've really created the magic that I've experienced before at our Women Plus Tech Leaders events, where it's incredible people sharing their experience, the audience sharing their experience. Everyone's a peer. There's no hierarchy, and everyone takes something away in a space that is, empowering and comforting. But so let's get into it, because you've mentioned that visibility versus volume is one of the key themes that comes into play when women have that question of, am I being unfairly not promoted in my business? Is there a reason that I'm not reaching leadership that doesn't feel justified? Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by visibility and by volume, and how those two interplay in this sort of context?
Absolutely. And I think, before we sort of get straight to that, there's a little bit that comes before, which is the way that women are engineered to work, and the way that we live, and the way that, we go about our daily lives. And there's a slight pet hate that I have, which over the course of my career, over 30 years, there's a lot of women in tech. Women are over here, men are over here, right? You have to be separate, and we bring our allies in, etc. And we focus very much on what do I need to do to become the same as everybody else, right? And to me, that's not equity. That's not a balance. We are
Mm,
different, right? Men are men, women are women, and we will behave differently. But instead of trying to hide that, what I'd really like is, I would like every other woman out there to take advantage of the fact that she is slightly different. They've got slightly different skills, right? Do you expect a man to be sat there to behave exactly as a woman would? You don't, right? That's why we're different. You need diversity. And that's one of the reasons why, when a woman goes to work, especially in a leadership position, we're programmed to take on as much as we possibly can in our daily lives, in our home life, in our friendship circles. We'll always be the ones organizing things, typically. And we want to do that at work. So, when you get that new promotion, it's, what can I do? And let me do everything, and prove that I'm absolutely amazing, right? So we take on more and more work, but it's the same type of work. Whereas typically, and most of the men that I have worked with will take on less in volume, but they'll take on the riskier projects. They'll take on the high profile projects. They'll take on the projects that they don't have the skills for. And it's not necessarily an ego thing. It is actually, I want to go and do something different, and I want to make myself more visible. And, I mean, there is a whole session around, that we could spend days talking about this, but it is effectively, pick the projects that you want to do, but be careful about them, right? Don't just keep on taking more and more of the same type of work, which is, and this goes back as well to, every single successful woman I've met in my career has been successful because she's had a plan about where she wants to go to next. You know,
mm,
People say to me, "Oh, you've had a fantastic career. It looks amazing. You've got all these type great companies." I have, but my career has been very intentional. So every
mm,
time there was a new technology on the horizon, every time there was a new emerging something coming along, right? Whether it was big data, whether it was converged infrastructure, whether it was cloud, I made a deliberate move to make sure that I was positioned in the right place to take advantage of that. It didn't just
mhm,
happen, you know? Um, and it's the same with the promotion. It's the same with the progression. It will not just happen because of the
mm.
fact that you're an amazing person and you can do the work of 10 people. That's great for your manager and it's great for those 10 people, but it doesn't make you stand out,
So
unfortunately.
Emma,
And I think
let
that's
me
where we stop.
let me ask you a question about that, Hema. So I'm getting the general vibe, and I think the intentional, handling your career intentionally is, that's good advice for anybody, as you say, right? But a minute ago, you were sort of heading in the direction of, like, men and women are different; they're not going to behave the same. But then you described men, I think accurately, as like putting their hands up and going, "I'll do that big hairy thing over there. I don't know how to do it, but I'll go and do it. Sounds more
Yes.
interesting. Will help me in my career and stuff like that." but the inference there is that women should do that as well. So, but we're not necessarily advocating that women should behave like men, but men behave like that and therefore get those opportunities. So if women behave like men, will they get those opportunities? Is that the right maths?
No, no, slight difference, maybe slight nuance in what we're trying to say here. So, I think it's a characteristic of how a successful male will operate and why men get promoted more than women do. Women typically don't put their hands up for those projects because they don't think they've got the skills, they don't think they're confident enough, whatever. 100 reasons for why women typically don't go for the riskier projects.
Sure.
And that's why I think as a female, that level of confidence is something that you have to build up yourself. It's okay if you don't have 100% of the skills. Most of your colleagues and counterparts don't either, right? But it's, are you prepared to take the risk to push yourself and to learn? But also, it's about how visible you become in that role. So, yes, it's a risky role, but you have to make sure that not only your manager knows about it, because let's be honest, right? Your manager with the best will in the world is not going to remember what you do day in, day out. You might think you're best friends with your manager, but in reality, you're not. So, record as you go along, build up the evidence, make sure that evidence is there, and actually make sure that your stakeholders are the right stakeholders. So as you're doing those riskier, slightly more visible and scarier projects, do people know about you, right? Now, I've worked with a lot of people and I've seen this happen many, many times where the males in the group will have regular one-to-ones with their skip leaders, right? And above. And they have great relationships. Do they necessarily have anything really important to say at those coffee meetings or those lunches or those socials? It's no, actually. It's how are you? How are you doing? Let's interact a little bit. Most females will shy away from that because they think if I don't have something important to say to my skip
Right.
level and above, I don't, I'm not good enough for that level. But that's where visibility comes in again, right? It's, have you got the right project? Have you got the right stakeholder management? Because those stakeholders become your sponsors tomorrow. And you have to be very intentional about how you bring them into the fold. But also it's, are you having regular communication, or is it just a one-off, right?
You don't need to do it in the same way men do, but you need to find some way, your own way, of achieving the same outcome of that being visible to those senior leaders, so that when that project comes along, when that moment comes, they think of you. That's the key, right?
Yes. Because
Right.
Doing your job really well is great, but actually, if you do it too well, that means that you can't be promoted. And a lot of women fall into that trap as well, which is you become, what's the right word for it? You become irreplaceable. And that's not a good thing if you're a woman who wants to be promoted, because
Right.
if you're irreplaceable, nobody will think of you for that next project because the stuff over here can't happen without you. So actually success looks very much today in a different lens than it did, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Success today for a female is very much build a team. In fact, for anyone, whether it's male or female, build a team, build a function that can operate without you. So if you need to go on leave, or if you jump out, as on emergency for whatever, actually that team can function without you and it can carry on successfully. Then what you've done is you've done something, you've achieved it, you've got that closure, and then you're ready to move on to the next thing. And it's I think it's heartbreaking because a lot of women probably expect that they should be promoted on the basis of the volume of work that they do. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that in a corporate.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's a really interesting point, and it resonates for me in particular that one of the first sort of promotions I went for when I was working in the tech field, I remember speaking to the HR leader and saying, I feel like I've been performing really well, and here's all of my sort of accolades and my and she said, yeah, but I don't really know what you've been doing. And it was interesting because in that business, HR, I didn't see it as kind of their role to know what was going on. I said, "Well, speak to my manager." She goes, "Well, okay, I'm busy. Like, I'll let you know." And then, you don't get the promotion. But I remember at the time thinking, gosh, I've been focusing 100% of my efforts on creating value for this company and 0% on creating visibility for myself. And I think that's the right, that's the way I create the most value. And if I take 10% away on creating visibility, then, I'm 90% less effective, or sorry, 10% less effective in the organization. I mean, how do you think about that, Hema? How do you strike a balance between creating visibility, but not having that take away from doing your best work?
It's hard, right? Because I think what you have to do is before you understand how you do your best work, you have to figure out what comes next for you. And I'm personally somebody who always looks ahead. So in order to do your best work now, that still has to include a plan of how you get to stage 2, right? Um, and yes, you do you put everything in, and if you do a job, you do it well. But at the same time, you need to have a little bit of time, which is intentionally and actively working towards your next bit as well. So, 50% of your workload is the stuff that you're really good at and that, you can add value with, and you're bringing the sales in, you're doing whatever you need to do. Great. But then the other 50% of time has to be, are you learning? And are you keeping up to date with what you need to do? Do you have the right skills to upskill? And are you doing that stakeholder management, right? Are you doing the risky project, and are you doing the stakeholder management to make sure that people know that you're doing it? And it doesn't have to be a report, it doesn't have to be a set of slides every 2 weeks or whatever, but that occasional drop in of, hey, yeah, I'm doing this and it's great, look, I could really do with some help here, or actually,
Yeah.
do you have an opinion on this? Because there's a little piece that I'm working on now and I'd really appreciate some guidance. Bring people into the fold. That works.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned previously sort of this concept of gathering evidence as you go. As you say, your manager who might be managing, 4 or 5 people isn't going to be documenting everything you do, and they're not going to remember when it comes to your yearly review. And that feels like a really practical tip that our listeners can take home. When you do something, when you create success, write it down somewhere, stick it. I will always advise people to have as well a sort of what I call a compliments folder. When you get good feedback from someone,
Yes.
stick it in a folder on your desktop. And if you're having a slightly grey day or a blue Monday, as David pointed out earlier today, is Blue Monday,
Yes.
apparently the saddest day
I
of the
didn't
year.
wear blue
Go into-
intentionally.
Yeah. You can go into your compliments folder and you can feel good about yourself, at a time when maybe you're feeling a little bit lower. You also mentioned, kind of stakeholders, and you mentioned that it's really important for women to kind of build that confidence so that they're spending time with their stakeholders, creating that sort of visibility of personality. I mean, do you have any advice for women on how to get that confidence if they're coming from an underconfident place? Is it sort of affirmations in the mirror? Is it, reflecting on the impact that they've had? Do you have any practical tips?
Um, it's a very scary experience, I think, no matter how confident you are. And actually, in reality, it's equally as scary for any male as well, because what you're doing is you're putting yourself out there and you're making yourself a little bit vulnerable. And you're hoping that, that senior stakeholder isn't going to just ignore you, and they're going to engage with you. And I think it happens, there's a way of doing it, which is softly start to introduce yourself into their circles, right? It doesn't have to be let's have a one-to-one, let's sit down and formally, or, I'd like to invite you to dinner straight away. There are social events, there are gatherings. It's okay to go up to somebody, and shake their hand and say, hi, I just want to introduce myself, how are you? And that's it. Initially, that's all it needs to be. And then as you are starting to communicate the work that you're doing in the progress, those people will be talking about you in corridors when you're not there. And actually, I think a lot of females are a bit scared of, if somebody's speaking about me and I'm not there, it must be a bad thing. It's not, actually. Sometimes it's just your name keeps coming up, right? Oh, Sophie's working on that. Did you know that? Oh, no, I didn't, right? And then, David might turn around, a couple of weeks later, and he'll be talking to somebody and say, oh, yeah, I was doing that, but Sophie's working on it. So, that regular repetition of you and your name starts to build your brand. So, I said at the start of this that your brand is very important, and it is, right? So all of these things are, who am I? Who do I want to be? And how do I want to be perceived? Helps in terms of building that confidence. Sometimes, yes, if you're a person who doesn't feel comfortable going up to somebody randomly and just, saying hello to them, I would say go to networking events, right? Actually push yourself a little bit. There are loads and loads of female tech leaders events where you can turn up to a room of 100 people or so. I mean, the London Tech Leaders events are great, right? Literally just walk around and you will see people who look and feel like you. And it's okay to go and say hello, because they're all feeling equally as scared as you are. And, slowly, the first time you do it, you will be terrified. You'll break out in a sweat, you'll be shaking. The second time you do it, it'll be a little bit less. By the time you get around to the 10th or the 12th time you do it, it'll be okay, I can do this, right? And that I believe that success breeds success. And it's the same with confidence. Once you start to feel good about something, you will do more and more of it. And most of the stakeholders are probably equally as nervous as you are.
And I think on that point, Hema, speaking as a male, senior leader, when I go to networking events or when I'm in a corporate environment in a group or whatever, I probably gravitate towards the men, right? Just naturally. Maybe I just feel a bit awkward injecting myself into a group of 2 or 3 women, right? So I think that's just part of nature, maybe my, insecurities or whatever. But if a woman comes or a couple of women come and talk to me at a networking event, I'm all in on that, right? I'm like, oh, this will be interesting. It won't just be the normal male kind of, how are you? How are you? Did you watch the cricket? Blah, 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 all that. Actually, it'll be a purposeful conversation. That's generally my experience. So actually, I think, the senior leaders are waiting. The male senior leaders are quite happy to be approached at these networking events. So I would agree with you. Be brave, get up there, just talk to them, because they're usually very, very responsive to that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, there are lots of things that you can do outside of your immediate company as well. So, there are listening circles, there are, group forums. I mean, LinkedIn is full of, things that people can go and attend and events. So I would say actually get the experience of doing that as well, because strangely, it's probably easier to go and network with somebody who you don't know and who isn't even in your company than it is to go and network with your leaders, because there's no expectation there. So if you remove the expectation of this is going to be absolutely great and I've got to be the center of the party, it becomes a lot easier because, okay, fine, everybody's here, right? But yes, there are. And actually, we ran a whole module last year on networking one-on-one, which was huge fun.
Amazing. Okay, so that's some great advice for our listeners. Just, sort of jump in. And I've certainly done it in my first networking event, where you have your line ready to go up to a group of people and say, would you mind if I join you? And you're absolutely terrified. And just for 4 or 5 seconds, you switch off that part of your brain. And by the time you said it, everyone's wonderful and you're in a conversation, and it's just kind of really strengthening that muscle and practicing timing again. And as you say, come along to one of our London Tech Leaders events. Everyone is so wonderful and so welcoming. So where can our listeners go if they want to learn a little bit more about, what you're up to, or follow you, or, engage with your masterclass?
So LinkedIn, I'm available on, so people can connect with me on LinkedIn. They can head to the website, which is it's being slightly changed at the moment because I'm just putting in a lot of the new module stuff. But the website, so www.lotusadvisory.co.uk, and reach out, drop me a DM, and if you're interested in any of the stuff that's coming up this year, then more than happy to have people come in and join the sessions. The one we've talked about today is obviously one of the modules. There will be others as well. There are lots of slightly more controversial sessions in version 2. But it's also not just a female thing, right? There are a lot of guys out there who get overlooked for promotions, and it's the same lessons, right? Do you understand what you're doing? Do other people understand what you're doing? Have you documented it? Don't wait for a year to go by before you say to your manager, I'm gunning for a promotion this year, so it's up to you to tell me what I need to do to get there. Don't tell me in a year, oh, you didn't quite meet the criteria. Tell me the criteria. That's the onus on them, not you. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of things that people can come and talk to me about.
Amazing. Well, I'm sure we can drop links to those in our bio as well, so that people can find out a little bit more.
Listen, thank you so much, Hema. Really good luck.
Thank you,
I dare say that we'll see you at the next London Tech Leaders event, and also the Women Plus Tech Leaders event, which would be really great.
You will, absolutely. Nice to see you both.
Thanks, Hema.
Bye.
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 We're now going to bring our quizmaster of quizmasters, the lovely Luke Wild, who will join us to take us through the mid-episode game. He, as normal, has not told Sophie and I what it is, so that we cannot have any competitive advantage.
Well, don't worry. It's another chance for Sophie to catch you up, David. So it currently sits 3-1 in the rankings. Once we've done 5 games, so after next week, you will see a live leaderboard popping up on your screens for our viewers.
How can it be 3-1 if this is our 6th episode?
Because we missed a week.
No, I don't think we did. I think it's 4-1.
Did we miss a week? I'm happy with it being 3-1.
I think it's
3-1. That's all right. I can start from there. That's a good platform.
It's nice to know that whilst this podcast is friendly, the game is still ridiculously competitive. So at least we're still here in spirit. Cool. So this week we are playing...
Tech or fake?
This week we are playing Tech or Fake. I will say a company, I'll read a one-sentence description of that company, and you need to tell me whether or not that company is real or fake. So,
Right.
for example, if I said to you, PQ Shield is a company that specializes in cryptography resistant to future quantum computing attacks, would you say that is real or fake?
I mean, it sounds so ridiculous, it's probably real.
I'm going to say fake.
Well, that one was real. So David would have got a point, but unfortunately, that was the practice question.
Only a practice, so I
Oh.
don't get a point.
Exactly. But we're looking for quick answers here. So it's going to be first to five as always. Here we go. First company. Game Science combines AI and game development for interactive simulations. Real or fake?
Real.
Fake.
It is real.
Yes.
Game Science is a real company that combines AI and game development for interactive simulations. Okay, 1-0 to Sophie. DeepX provides machine learning frameworks for research institutions.
Fake.
DeepX.
I think fake as well.
You're both correct. It is fake.
Yeah.
It's not a real company. Cloudra, a multi-cloud management and orchestration platform.
Real.
You sure it's not Cloudera? Because I think that's
No, it's Cloudra.
Oh, well, Cloudera is real, so Cloudra, I'm going to say true.
What did you say, Sophie? Sorry?
I said true as well. Or real.
You're both incorrect. It is fake.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay. The Corgi Company, often referred to as Corgi, uses AI to optimize insurance policies and claims.
Why a corgi?
Yeah, why Corgi? Like
Insurance
posh,
policies
the Queen
and-
liked Corgis, didn't she? You see, so maybe
Well, she was big on insurance, or
yeah.
so it's a British
Corgis and insurance. Everybody knows that. Sophie, come on, go for it.
Yes.
You say it's
Yeah.
true, Sophie. You say it's true.
No, I think that's not true. I think you guys are trying to see what you can get away with.
I'm going to say
okay,
it's true.
I think it's a fake
It
company.
is true. So the Corgi Company is a real company that uses AI to optimize insurance policy and claims. So I think
like
that is 2-2.
Uninfluenced you there, Sophie.
Okay, here we go. Orsomic, an AI-powered platform connecting companies to on-demand design and marketing talent. Orsomic, so awesome and sonic combined. Orsomic.
Yeah, you sound too pleased with that one, Luke, so I'm going to say fake.
I'm going to say real.
It is real. It's an AI-powered platform connecting companies to on-demand design and marketing talent.
Wow.
There we go. So 3-2 to Sophie. Pixelon offers cloud rendering and graphics optimization tools.
True. Fake. Real. Sorry. Real.
I think,
You answer all of the questions.
Fake. Real.
I think it's real as well. Yeah.
You're both incorrect. It is fake. Unfortunately, that company does not exist.
The name was 2 1 point.
Yeah. Quantara develops cloud-based quantum computing software solutions. Currently 3-2 to Sophie.
Expert, so I'll let you go first, Sophie.
I'm going to say, what was it called? Quantara
develops cloud-based quantum computing software solutions.
Let's say it's real. And sorry, Jeremy, if that's your company and I don't know the name.
I'm going to say fake.
It is fake. I think Quantex is the one that they were going off there. So, yes. Yeah. So 3-3. 3-3. Manicore Tech produces specialized chips for AI and high-performance computing.
Real.
I may have said that wrong. It's actually Manycore, not Manny. Manycore Tech. It's because I'm going to Manchester this weekend, I think.
Real.
What did you say, Sophie?
I said it's real, and I'm going to stick with real after you corrected the name.
Well, that might have been a giveaway because it is real. So that is 4-4. So in a winner-takes-all situation.
Okay.
So hopefully this is the final question. Vault provides real-time payments infrastructure for banks and fintechs.
Real.
I think there are things very similar to that, but I don't know that there's anybody called just Vault. Vault is also a product from Microsoft. I'm going to say fake.
It is real. Sophie is the winner.
Yes. The streak
Provides
continues.
real-time payments for infrastructure for banks and
Well,
fintechs.
there
That
you
either
go.
takes us to 3-2 or 4-2. Who knows? We'll let the audience decide. But next week we'll have a leaderboard so we don't lose track.
What we should do as a sort of side spin-off is take the fake ones and with their descriptions and actually launch real companies off the back of them. That's what we should do. That'd be a good idea.
See how many sponsors we can put on London Tech
Yeah.
News events with these names.
Why not? We could AI the whole thing. We could, this time next year, we could be millionaires.
That would be our deep fake, yeah. Anyway, thanks for playing this week. It's nice to see Sophie on the comeback. Keeps in fitting with our games so far. And I'll see you next week for another round of the mid-episode game.
We're going to round off our week with a disaster diary. So another one of our listeners has been kind enough to write in with one of their challenges. I'll give you a little heads up on the letter that we got. Dear David and Sophie, a few years ago, we were deciding whether to build a critical and internal tool from scratch or buy a third-party solution. Aha, the old build-buy conundrum. The team leaned toward building. They always want to build. We knew our systems inside out. We wanted full control, and it felt like the right technical choice. I bet it did. We went all in. Development took longer than expected. Of course it did. Integration with other systems was messier than anyone predicted, naturally. By the time we were ready, the market had moved on, and the vendor solution we dismissed had added the features we'd needed at half the cost and risk. It was a classic trap. Confidence in our technical ability had blinded us to the business trade-off. David and Sophie, how, in your opinion, do you decide whether it's the correct decision to build or buy? And he or she would love any examples of your experience and how they panned out would be great. So, Sophie, we've been here, the build or buy conundrum, right? And I think this particular listener was outlining how it was sort of judging themselves and saying, yeah, we were a bit cocky, we were a bit confident in our ability. And I find that does cloud people's judgment, right? I find the tech team, if you've got a bunch of developers and you say, hey, do you want to build something or should we just go and buy it? Of course they're going to say build, right? Sort of thing. But how have you approached this? What's the sort of product thinking around build or buy?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think as one of the really big points is that everyone gets excited and goes, yeah, I can do that. And they've almost started working on it before they've finished the sentence, right? And so for me, the top thing is always overcoming that excitement. And so I think your question is, what do we use to overcome that excitement? I think for me, the major question is this something we should be building? And you always answer that question with, what is our USP? What is our kind of unique perspective or skill set that would make sense for us to build this, right? So I'll give you an example of a couple of tools I worked on. So I joined a healthcare company a few years ago, and this healthcare company, a decision had been made many years prior to build their own electronic medical record, which for anyone who has been involved in building electronic medical records, it's difficult, right? And so we would find ourselves, we would look at our roadmap and say, well, we're spending a large amount of money. I won't say how much, but it was hundreds of thousands every we were working in 6-week cycles, hundreds of thousands every 6 weeks to build a feature that was so commonplace in all of the other EMRs that you could get off the shelf. And so we would kind of go through that cycle and go, well, that felt like a total waste of time. And, this is our whole team and it was a small team versus, you've got your sort of Athenas or someone like that where they've got decades of expertise and thousands of engineers who are really specialized in this. Go, why the hell are we building it? And then we would have the next cycle and realize that there was actually something that it really made sense for us to have and that would really add value to us as an organization as a whole that you couldn't get anywhere else. So it was always this kind of back and forth. And the challenge for us in that situation was, it was a yes or no decision. Do we build our own EMR or do we buy an EMR? But there were lots of components that sort of made us say yes or made us say no. But, really they boiled down to, does it make sense for us to be building this? Is there someone out there who has much greater resource, much greater expertise to build it for us and the kind of pass on cost to us will be much lower? And is it a commodity or is it something that will actually really change what we can offer as a business and allow us to create more value to our customer? I think the tagline we always hear is that if we build this feature fantastically and no customer even notices, probably for us that should be a warning sign in terms of we weren't supposed to build it in the first place. Yeah. So I think for me, that's the major thing. Like, does it make sense for us to build this or is it something that's a commodity? What about you, David? Have you kind of faced this challenge previously?
I mean, largely, I think I agree with that approach. I think there's a couple of nuances I would bring. So first of all, I always extend the build or buy sentence to build, buy, both. right? So when I'm looking for a solution, if we're going to build it, we're going to build it. But can we use some standard componentry to help us along the way with that, right? You might go for a pass type solution which does a lot of the basic stuff around authentication and user management and messaging and all those kind of things. So you just don't need to build those things, right? So you could get halfway up the ladder. So that's a sort of both. Or if you're going to buy, then is it an extensible solution, right? So I'm always looking for some kind of solution where it's not necessarily open source, but it could be. But where they're saying, hey, we've got some extensions, you could hook on to something on side. There's an API comes out of it or whatever, right? And that way, it's not a one-way door, right? If you sort of buy something and then you go, damn, we thought the vanilla-ness of this would work for us, but actually we've got some uniqueness that we need to do, then you could extend it yourself, right? So I think that's hedging my bets a little bit, maybe. But so that's one of the things I look out for. I add on the both bit. And then the other thing is it depends where you are as a company, right? So I think if you're a company who, as you were saying in your sector, specialize on a particular product set, I'd call that the crown jewels. That's the thing that's going to, if that feature or set of features in that particular part of the product are going to make the difference, are going to differentiate you from your competitors and give real value to your customers or your internal stakeholders if you're building it for an internal team, then I think keeping it close, that's your crown jewels. You hang on to that, you own it, you control it. I think that's the build sort of approach. But like you say, if it's a commodity, it's just not going to make any difference, right? It's an email. It sends emails, right? But I mean, why would anybody build an email solution client from the bottom up these days? You just wouldn't, right? So I think so. So if it's a commodity, go out and buy it and get it integrated, and that's fine. But the other thing in terms of the size of the company is the journey of the team, right? So the way you described it a minute ago, what if that team are like, well, what are we going to do? If everything has been built by everybody else and we're now an integration team, we're just a bit of glue or something, or so what are they going to get to do? And so sometimes it depends what the purpose of your company is, right? And if you're trying to bring on and grow a team in a particular skill set, and depending on, you might got a lot of graduates in there, so you might go, do you know what? It wouldn't be that bad for them to learn how to build this system, right? Even though I could buy it from somewhere else, it would give them a good grounding. So I think if you have the luxury of, having a sizable team and a sizable budget and you're bringing that team on, you might give them some tasks which have been solved elsewhere, so that they can cut their teeth and get it. So there's a bit of nuance in there, but generally speaking, I think you what you said is spot on. If it's a commodity and it adds no differentiation to your product set, or then why would you waste your money building it? And it's not just a case of could we build it. I think this is our listener was like, we thought we were technically able. You maybe were technically. You might even have been more technically able than the company who built the product you're going to buy. But what you won't have done is poured in the millions and millions of market research, product innovation that company did. So it's like, it's very simply thinking this product has been developed for millions of people all over the world rather than the 100,000 we're going to develop it for, right? And so it's going to have that much more capability, that much more maturity, and hopefully, as I say, that much more flexibility in it. So I don't think it's too hard a decision. I think people worry about it a lot and maybe pander to their teams a bit too much,
Yeah, I agree with you. And for me as a product person, and I think this applies across, the way we build product roadmaps and make decisions about what we're going to build and what we're not going to build, is almost taking the question, do we build it or do we buy it? Just put the buy to a side for 1 second and say, well, do we build this or do we build something else? Right. And then pretty quickly you can say, well, wouldn't it be amazing if we didn't have to build this guy? Because look at all of the stuff we can do that will really make a difference. And that, it gives you the buy answer for you without having this kind of, there's always going to be reasons to build. There's always going to be reasons to buy. But sometimes that kind of confidence and conclusiveness comes from evaluating the opportunity cost. And it sounds like this person they've sort of written in and said, confidence in our technical ability blinded us to the business trade-offs. So, they know there are business trade-offs to be made. They probably know how to sit down and evaluate those trade-offs and come to a good decision. And so it sounds like the challenge here is really just, overcoming that enthusiasm of we can, so we should, which again is just, once you're aware of it, put a sticky note on your wall that says, overcome enthusiasm, and you just remember to raise that in the conversation every time and not to get so excited that you forget to raise.
I think
that
having a few good rules like that, and applying them, and then it becomes clear, and people won't just do it for the sake of doing it. They'll do it because of the value it adds and the purpose. That's really good. Listen, I hope for our listener out there and some of you that was a useful disaster diary. And maybe it's not a disaster, maybe it's a good learning experience for your team, and they'll all move on from that. So that's good. Why don't you wrap us up for the week, Sophie, and give us a bit of a summary and tell us about what we can do in terms of getting in touch.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining us all the way to the episode. Thank you, David, for as always a very stimulating conversation. We've had a great session. We've been able to announce that our 5th of March Women Plus Tech Leaders event is now live. So do go and sign up to that. We discussed what was happening in the news about internet shutdowns and losing contact with those technologies we've come to rely on, using AI to generate music, as well as poor old Elon Musk and all of the problems that are piling up with his poorly regulated AI grok. We had an amazing chat with Hema Purohit, who told us all about, what women can do to sort of support their visibility of their work as opposed to the volume of their work that can support their progression into tech leaders from tech contributors. We also had a fantastic midweek game, which I'm delighted to report I won. Thank you for everyone who supported me in this journey so far. Thank you to my parents. And we had a disaster diary where we spoke about the sort of build versus buy conundrum that always faces us, and some practical tips to approach a really sort of strong and thought through answer for that. So thank you so much for joining us. If you do have your own disaster diary, please, you can send it to us at partner@londontechleaders.io, and we will do our best to put you on the air and hopefully give you some useful advice. But do make sure to, if you enjoyed the episode, like it, subscribe, share with your colleagues if there are any tips or anything we discussed that you think would be valuable to them. And we look forward to joining you next week.
Thanks very much. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.